In the early 2000s, Yvette Fielding wasn't just a television presenter, she was a cultural phenomenon. Most Haunted exploded onto British television in 2002 and instantly became one of the most watched paranormal shows in the world. It was raw, intense, and genuinely terrifying for viewers who had never seen anything like it before. Yvette led the team into abandoned hospitals, ancient castles, and reportedly haunted locations across the UK, screaming and running through dark corridors as cameras captured what appeared to be genuine supernatural activity. The show made paranormal investigation mainstream long before ghost adventures or ghost hunters dominated American television. Yvette became a household name, trusted by millions of viewers who believed she was genuinely trying to document proof of life after death. Her background as a children's television presenter on shows like Blue Peter gave her credibility and relatability. She wasn't some fringe conspiracy theorist. She was the girl next door investigating the unknown. Behind the scenes, her husband Carl Beatty worked as producer and director, creating a family operation that seemed authentic and passionate about uncovering the truth. The show's format was simple but effective. Yvette and her team would arrive at a location. Psychic medium Derek Acora would provide historical information, supposedly channeled from spirits, and then the crew would conduct overnight investigations filled with unexplained noises, moving objects, and terrifying encounters. For years, it worked perfectly. Ratings soared. International versions launched. Yvette Fielding became synonymous with paranormal television. The production values were surprisingly high for the time, with night vision cameras, thermal imaging, and audio equipment that made everything feel scientific and legitimate. Viewers across Britain would tune in religiously, gathering with friends and family to watch Yvette brave the darkness in search of proof that death wasn't the end. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. Questions were being asked. Skeptics were watching closely. Industry insiders whispered about staged moments and convenient camera angles. And one man in particular, parapsychologist Dr. Ciaran O'Keefe, was about to expose something that would change everything and destroy the carefully constructed illusion that had made Yvette a star. Dr. Ciaran O'Keefe joined Most Haunted as the show's resident parapsychologist and skeptic, brought in to provide scientific credibility to the investigations. But O'Keefe wasn't just there to validate the phenomena. He was watching, analyzing, and quietly conducting his own experiment that would eventually blow the show wide open. Derek Acora was the show's star psychic medium, the man who would arrive at locations and immediately begin channeling spirits, providing names, dates, and historical details that seemed impossibly accurate. Week after week, Derek would be possessed by various entities, his voice changing dramatically, his body convulsing violently, delivering theatrical performances that kept audiences coming back for more. His most famous spirit guide was a man named Sam, who Derek claimed helped him communicate with the dead. The phrase, "Mary loves Dick," became an infamous moment in paranormal television history, emblematic of Derek's over-the-top style. But O'Keefe had serious doubts from the very beginning. As someone who had spent years studying paranormal claimants and testing psychics in controlled laboratory environments, he recognized the classic techniques of cold reading, hot reading, and theatrical performance. Derek's abilities seemed far too convenient, far too perfectly timed for television drama, always delivering exactly what producers needed at exactly the right moment. So O'Keefe devised a brilliant and devious test. Before filming at various locations, he began feeding Derek completely fabricated historical information through casual conversations and pre-production meetings, fake names of people who never existed, false stories about events that never happened, invented tragedies and fictional characters, all carefully designed to see if Derek would channel these non-existent spirits during filming. And Derek did, repeatedly, without fail. He would arrive at locations and begin communicating with the exact fake spirits that O'Keefe had planted in conversations days earlier. Names like Rick Edels, which was actually an anagram for Derek is Lead, historical details that were completely invented, tragic backstories that never occurred, all presented by Derek as genuine spiritual communication received directly from beyond the veil. When O'Keefe finally revealed what he had done in interviews and public statements, the paranormal community exploded with controversy. This wasn't mere speculation or typical skepticism. This was hard proof, documented evidence. Derek Acora had been exposed as a fraud on national television, caught red-handed using information fed to him by production staff, not channeling spirits at all but simply regurgitating details he'd been given beforehand. The revelation should have destroyed Most Haunted's credibility instantly and permanently, but instead, something strange and deeply troubling happened. The show kept bringing Derek back, continuing to feature him prominently despite the exposure. For years, rumors circulated wildly about what really happened behind the scenes on Most Haunted. Crew members whispered in private conversations. Production assistants shared stories in online forums under anonymous accounts. But there was never concrete proof of how Yvette really felt about the deception, about Derek's methods, about the authenticity of what they were filming and presenting to millions of trusting viewers, until a secret recording suddenly surfaced online. The clip appeared on YouTube approximately 2 years ago, but recently gained massive renewed attention when paranormal investigator and content creator Mythos Paranormal analyzed it in forensic detail and brought it back to public consciousness. The footage shows what appears to be behind-the-scenes material from a Most Haunted shoot, grainy and clearly not meant for broadcast, with audio that allegedly captures Yvette Fielding's unguarded real thoughts about Derek Acorah when she believed cameras weren't recording for the show. The voice, believed to be Yvette's based on tone and accent, can be heard saying something absolutely shocking that contradicts everything she'd told viewers. According to careful analysis and subtitles provided by Mythos Paranormal after enhancing and isolating the audio, the recording captures this devastating statement. "I just saw you then, I go, then you would have had a bag a minute later and got possessed 5 times after that. Possessions aren't real because possessions aren't real. He's a fake." The implications are absolutely devastating for Yvette's credibility and reputation. If this recording is authentic and unmanipulated, it provides definitive proof that Yvette knew Derek was fraudulent, knew the dramatic possessions weren't real supernatural events, and continued featuring him prominently on the show anyway, deliberately deceiving millions of loyal viewers who trusted her implicitly to provide genuine investigation. The clip never actually shows Yvette's face clearly, which immediately raises legitimate questions about authenticity and verification. Could the audio be edited or taken out of context? Could it be AI generated using voice synthesis technology? The original upload dates back 2 years, when AI voice technology was becoming more sophisticated but still had limitations. Mythos Paranormal, the researcher and YouTuber who broke this story to a wider audience, attempted to reach out to Yvette directly for clarification and comment. He sent the clip asking if it was genuine, if it had been altered or manipulated in any way, or if she could provide any context or explanation. Yvette, who had previously been communicative and responsive to paranormal community inquiries, went completely silent. No denial, no explanation, no legal threat or cease and desist, just deafening silence. And in the world of public relations and reputation management, silence often speaks far louder than any carefully crafted statement could. If the recording was fabricated or fake, why not immediately and forcefully denounce it? Why not take swift legal action against what would constitute clear defamation? The conspicuous lack of response has led many observers to believe the recording is genuine and authentic, and that Yvette knew exactly what she was doing all along throughout the entire run of the show. When the Derek Acorah scandal first broke publicly through O'Keefe's revelations, the paranormal community was sharply and bitterly divided. Die-hard believers defended Derek passionately, claiming skeptics simply didn't understand how genuine mediumship actually works, and that science couldn't explain everything. But as more and more evidence emerged, as O'Keefe provided detailed documentation of his elaborate experiment with specific examples and dates, the tide turned decisively and irreversibly against Derek. Derek faced brutal, unrelenting public criticism, including a devastating live television appearance where outspoken skeptic Louis Sava confronted him directly and aggressively about his methods, beliefs, and the validity of his supposed abilities. The exchange was incredibly uncomfortable to watch, with Derek attempting desperately to defend his spiritual worldview and explain his process while Louis systematically dismantled the logical foundation of psychic mediumship with scientific arguments. The conversation became heated when Louis accused Derek of preying on vulnerable, grieving people for profit. But the controversy went even deeper and darker when Derek's own personal website was examined closely by critics and journalists. Investigators discovered that Derek had published disturbing material suggesting that people who suffer horrific abuse or violent murder somehow bring these terrible fates on themselves through spiritual karma, past life choices, or predetermined soul contracts. The deeply offensive implication that innocent victims of horrific crimes consciously chose their suffering before birth was morally reprehensible to most decent people, and even die-hard defenders of Derek struggled mightily to justify or explain away those statements. For Yvette, the continued association with Derek became increasingly toxic and career-threatening. Her show, her reputation, her entire career and public identity had been built almost entirely on the back of a man now widely recognized as a charlatan, and someone whose twisted spiritual philosophy essentially blamed victims for their own suffering and trauma. Most Haunted's credibility collapsed completely and catastrophically. Viewers who had believed every scream, every supposed possession, every dramatic moment caught on camera now looked back with clear eyes and saw obvious manipulation, staging, and deception. They felt betrayed, lied to, exploited for ratings and profit by people they had trusted. The show that had once dominated paranormal television and defined the genre became a punchline and cautionary tale. Parody videos appeared everywhere across YouTube and social media. Skeptical channels dedicated entire series to tearing apart old episodes frame by frame, pointing out obvious fakery, convenient camera angles that hid production crew, and suspicious audio editing that enhanced or created sounds. And at the center of it all, unavoidably, was Yvette Fielding, the woman who had sworn repeatedly to viewers she was genuinely investigating the paranormal with integrity, now exposed as someone who allegedly knew her star medium was a complete fraud and featured him anyway for years. The damage to her reputation was catastrophic, permanent, and perhaps most painfully, entirely deserved. After the controversy nearly destroyed Most Haunted completely, Yvette and Carl attempted multiple desperate comebacks over the following years, trying frantically to rebuild credibility and somehow recapture their former massive success and cultural relevance. Most Haunted returned for new seasons on different networks, now conspicuously without Derek Acorah, attempting to rebrand as more authentic, more scientific, more credible and legitimate. They brought in new psychics, updated equipment, changed the format slightly, anything to distance themselves from the scandal. But the fundamental damage was already done and couldn't be undone. Viewers who had trusted Yvette implicitly for years simply couldn't forget or forgive the betrayal. The ratings never remotely recovered to their peak levels when the show was a genuine cultural phenomenon. The show that had once pulled millions of viewers and dominated conversation was now a niche product appealing only to a dramatically reduced audience of diehard fans who either didn't care about the controversy or chose to ignore it. Yvette attempted to distance herself carefully from Derek in various interviews and public statements, giving carefully worded responses where she discussed the challenges and complications of working with psychic mediums on television. But she never fully and honestly addressed the secret recording directly or explicitly admitted she knew about the fraud while it was actively happening and being broadcast. The carefully worded diplomatic statements and obvious evasive answers only made her seem more complicit and guilty in the eyes of critics and former fans. She and Carl launched other paranormal-related projects, trying desperately to prove she was actually serious about legitimate investigation and not just entertainment, but skeptics and former fans had already made up their minds permanently. Every new show was scrutinized ruthlessly and picked apart. Every supposed piece of paranormal evidence was torn apart immediately by online investigators and debunkers, who now automatically assumed everything was faked or staged. The internet had turned decisively against her with virtually no path to redemption. Where she once had millions of devoted fans defending her passionately, she now faced constant mockery, ridicule, and accusations across all platforms. YouTube channels dedicated specifically to debunking paranormal content made Yvette a frequent target, creating compilation videos of her most obviously fake moments. Reddit threads dissected every episode forensically, pointing out inconsistencies and likely staging. Twitter became a hostile environment where any mention of Most Haunted was immediately met with jokes about Rick Edel's fake possessions and Derek's theatrical performances. For someone who had built their entire identity and self-worth around being a trusted paranormal investigator and respected television personality, this relentless public humiliation was absolutely devastating on every level. Yvette went from being a respected, beloved television personality who inspired a generation to being seen as someone who had deliberately and cynically deceived vulnerable people who were desperately seeking proof of life after death to comfort their grief. The financial impact was significant and long-lasting as well. Most Haunted never regained its major network backing, international distribution deals, or lucrative sponsorships. Production budgets shrank dramatically. The show moved to progressively smaller networks and streaming platforms with limited reach. What was once a thriving television empire had been reduced to something much smaller, much less significant, barely surviving rather than thriving. While we don't have complete, unrestricted access to Yvette's private struggles and personal pain, the public evidence and observable behavior strongly suggests the scandal took an enormous and lasting personal toll on every aspect of her life. Her marriage to Carl Beatty, while still apparently intact publicly based on their continued professional collaboration, faced intense pressure that most relationships couldn't possibly survive. They had built their careers together from nothing, created a successful production company together, achieved fame and success as a team, and now watched their hard-earned reputation crumble together in real time. The stress of maintaining a public relationship and professional partnership while facing constant criticism, mockery, and accusations is something most couples never have to endure, and the psychological strain must have been immense. Yvette largely withdrew from social media platforms where she had once been extremely active and regularly engaged directly with fans, answering questions and sharing behind-the-scenes content. Her online presence became minimal, carefully controlled by handlers, avoiding controversy or any topic that might reignite the Derek Acora discussion or invite renewed criticism. For someone whose entire career depended fundamentally on public visibility, audience connection, and maintaining a parasocial relationship with viewers, this forced retreat represented a significant and painful defeat. Friends and former colleagues from the broader paranormal investigation community quietly distanced themselves to protect their own reputation. Many investigators who had appeared on Most Haunted as guests or collaborated with Yvette on various projects suddenly stopped mentioning her in interviews, removed references from their websites, or actively avoided acknowledging their past association when asked. In the relatively tight-knit paranormal community where reputation and credibility are everything, being associated with confirmed fraud and deception is absolute career poison that contaminates everyone nearby. Yvette's mental health almost certainly suffered tremendously, though she's never spoken publicly or honestly about the psychological impact of her fall from grace. Imagine dedicating literally decades of your life to something you presumably started with genuine passion, achieving massive mainstream success beyond your wildest dreams, becoming beloved by millions of people around the world, and then watching it all collapse catastrophically because of revelations about deception, fraud, and betrayal of audience trust. The psychological impact and emotional devastation of that kind of spectacular public fall is absolutely devastating and life-altering. She went from being someone people looked up to with admiration, someone who inspired widespread interest in the paranormal and made it accessible to mainstream audiences, to being someone whose name became permanently synonymous with fake ghost hunting and fraudulent investigation. For a person who likely started with genuine passion and sincere curiosity about the supernatural and life after death, this transformation into a cautionary tale and symbol of everything wrong with paranormal television must be deeply, profoundly painful on a level most people could never truly understand. Today, Yvette Fielding exists in a strange and uncomfortable limbo between former fame that she can never fully reclaim and relative obscurity that she desperately tries to escape. Most Haunted technically still produces new episodes sporadically, but the cultural impact and relevance is virtually non-existent compared to its peak years when it dominated conversation. The show that once pulled millions of viewers and launched countless imitators now struggles desperately for any relevance whatsoever in an oversaturated paranormal content market where competition is fierce. YouTube has completely democratized ghost hunting and paranormal investigation for better or worse. Anyone with a decent camera and basic editing software can become a paranormal investigator overnight, and many of these amateur creators actually have more credibility and larger audiences than Yvette because they were never involved in a major fraud scandal that destroyed their reputation. The barrier to entry disappeared completely, and with it, Yvette's special status as one of the few people with access to major production resources, professional crews, and network backing. She occasionally appears at paranormal conventions and fan events, desperately trying to maintain some connection to the community and her remaining fan base. But these appearances often attract protesters or confrontational skeptics who show up specifically to confront her publicly about the Derek Acora situation and demand answers she refuses to provide. What should be friendly fan interactions and nostalgic celebration become uncomfortable confrontations about credibility, honesty, and whether she ever genuinely cared about truth or just ratings and profit. Her legacy is permanently and irreparably tarnished beyond any hope of rehabilitation. When people discuss the history of paranormal television and its evolution, Most Haunted is mentioned as an important early show that helped popularize the genre, but always with the necessary caveat about the fraud scandal and O'Keefe's exposure. Yvette's name appears in lists of discredited investigators alongside other controversial figures who were caught faking evidence or deceiving audiences. The woman who claimed she wanted to prove life after death and provide comfort to grieving people is now primarily remembered for allegedly faking evidence of it for television ratings. Financially, the situation is unclear since Yvette keeps her personal finances private, but it's highly unlikely she maintained the substantial wealth she accumulated during Most Haunted's peak years of success. Television residuals dried up when the show lost syndication deals. New projects consistently failed to gain significant traction or audience. The production company she and Carl built together never recovered its former profitability or secured new major projects. Most tragically and painfully, Yvette lost something that money absolutely cannot replace under any circumstances: her hard-earned reputation and the public trust she had spent years building. In an industry where credibility is literally everything, where the fundamental trust between investigator and audience is absolutely essential for success, having your integrity questioned publicly and never adequately answering those questions is an absolute career death sentence. And for Yvette, those serious questions have never been answered satisfactorily or honestly to anyone's genuine satisfaction. The secret recording remains the massive elephant in the room that Yvette has never properly, directly, or satisfactorily addressed, despite years of public pressure and repeated calls for transparency. Her continued silence on this specific issue is absolutely deafening and speaks volumes. If the audio was manipulated, edited, or completely fabricated as some defenders claim, why not simply say so clearly and provide evidence? Why not hire audio forensics experts to analyze and debunk it? Why not provide the original unedited footage or recording to prove manipulation? Why not threaten or pursue legal action against those spreading what would clearly be defamatory material, if false? The conspicuous lack of any response whatsoever suggests one of only two realistic possibilities. Either the recording is completely genuine, and Yvette knows she absolutely cannot credibly deny it without opening herself to further scrutiny, or she's been advised by expensive lawyers that engaging with the controversy in any way would only make things dramatically worse by drawing more attention. Neither option reflects well on her character or integrity. Other serious questions remain frustratingly unanswered as well, despite years of public interest. How much did Yvette actually know about Derek's specific methods and techniques? When exactly did she discover or realize he was using fed information rather than genuine psychic ability? If she genuinely believed he was legitimate initially as she's implied, why continue working with him extensively after O'Keefe's devastating revelation? Was the entire show carefully scripted from the very beginning, or did it gradually become more manufactured and staged as ratings pressure increased and producers demanded better content? Did other psychics and mediums who appeared regularly on Most Haunted also use similar deceptive methods with production's knowledge? These questions matter enormously because they determine whether Yvette was a willing, knowing participant in deliberate fraud or someone who got swept up in television industry pressures and made terrible decisions that spiraled out of control. The paranormal community and the millions of viewers who trusted her deserve clear, honest answers, but Yvette has provided absolutely none despite numerous opportunities. Her continued silence might be legally strategic as attorneys advise, but it's morally unsatisfying and feels like confirmation of guilt to most observers. People who watched Most Haunted faithfully for years, who believed deeply in the investigations, who were genuinely moved by the possibility of life after death being scientifically proven. They deserved honesty and transparency from someone they trusted. Instead, they got carefully produced entertainment cynically packaged as legitimate investigation. They got fraud deliberately marketed as authenticity. And the person who stood at the center of it all, who claimed to care deeply about finding truth, has never fully acknowledged what actually happened or taken any real responsibility for her role in the widespread deception of millions.